The minus wave is the hardest gameplay type, and today I'm going to be going a bit more in-depth on how to make them. Currently I have this entire section of wave gameplay made, and the most crucial detail to pay attention to is that the top path and the bottom path are not the same. In my original tutorial, I glossed over 2-player mode quite a bit. If you want to make harder levels, then duels are a really good way to do it. I personally don't use mini-wave all that much, so the rest of this tutorial is going to be for the bigger wave. The first thing I'm going to talk about are gaps. This gap right here, despite looking incredibly difficult, is not all that difficult for an impossible level. As you can see right here, there's a relatively large gap between the wave hitbox and the side hitbox. There are 2 ways to make this gap tighter. The first one is using something that I like to call macro walls for no reason in particular. This is basically just moving the slopes in. To my knowledge, the tightest variation of this is half a block in and 1 small step out. That is a 2-frame gap on 1440 FPS. The second way, which is the way that I usually use, is spike walls. Now this gap is a bit tighter than the normal slopes. However, this really gets more difficult when you put more spikes in the spikes. In the original generic impossible level, these weren't spaced in quite as much. However, if I space these in 1 full small space in both directions, and then push them a mini step out in both directions, and this is a 1, 2, 3-frame gap on 1440. Now, although this gap is tighter than this gap, I still usually use this one. Although, now that I'm messing around with these, I might switch to using these ones. Now, continuing additions to the normal wave corridor, there are gravity portals. These can be scaled down, or just not, rotated 45 degrees, and then put into the wave. And just like that, you have to toggle your input whenever hitting one of these. The current meta for minus waves uses these a lot more than the old standard of blue orbs. Speaking of blue orbs, there are 3, 4, 5 types of orbs that are usually used in waves. However, blue and green orbs basically do the same thing, and I'm only going to be talking about blue. There's a very high chance you already know what the blue orbs do. When you press it, it switches your gravity, and it also toggles your input so you still are going the same way, so you have to let go, and then you can go down. Basically, you have to microclick instead of holding and releasing to change which way you're going. Extending off of this, most people don't use blue orbs because there's a much better option available. For the same price of CPS, you can make the microclick much more micro. Instead of accelerating towards this slope at the normal 45 degrees, you accelerate to it at quite a higher amount, meaning that the microclick is a lot more micro. And then there are normal dash orbs, which have an even greater CPS cost than pink dash orbs or blue orbs. For these, you have to press release, and then start holding again. The first time you press, it will activate the dash orb, and then you'll release, and then you can press again. And lastly, toggle orbs. Now currently, this is set to activate group 6, which, through all this trigger nonsense that you don't need to worry about, it just moves the saw blade all the way up and kills the player, and this just forces really late timings, as well as prevents the use of show trajectory, for some reason. My personal recommendation for making difficult wave gameplay is right here. If you're able to, use a normal dash orb going into a reverse gravity portal into another dash orb. However, in the spaces where that's not possible, where right here that would be above the CPS limit, using a pink dash orb. Of course, in addition to adding on the gaps. As well as doing it for a large amount of time, at a higher speed, and in 2-player mode. So that was a more in-depth tutorial on minus waves. Hopefully using the things that I said in this video, you can make a lot harder levels. I know that on Whirl, minus waves are not considered repetitive gameplay abuse, but on the ILL I think they are. I hope I was able to inform you or entertain you. Farewell for now.